Thanks for joining. This is part 3 of our Fundraising Analytics webinar series. In our first 2 parts, we cover donor segmentation fundamentals and how to apply different strategies to different donor types. If you missed those, no worries. You can find the recordings of them on our YouTube channel, Reporting Express. Today, we're going to talk about optimizing timing and frequency and donor scoring. After today's session, you'll receive a recording of today's webinar, the full slide deck, and a PDF of our Fundraising Analytics ebook. And if you've attended all 3, you're going to get a certificate of completion, a comprehensive donor analysis template, and a 30-minute private consultation. Just a few housekeeping things. Your cameras and microphones are turned off, but if you'd like, you can open the Q&A panel at the top of your screen, and we will have someone monitoring those. Anything that's not answered in the Q&A will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Today's host is Joel Weinbach, the CEO of Reporting Express, and with that, I will hand it off to him.
Thank you. Today's agenda, we're going to talk a quick review through segmentation again. Not everybody has seen that, and even if you have, it's a good idea to kind of level set again if you don't remember everything. We'll talk very briefly about some of the tools that you might use to perform this type of analysis, and then we'll start our deep dive into the timing of asks, scoring methods, and next steps, and answer any questions anybody may have. First question you might have is, why now? It is a really good time to be thinking about getting more out of your data. Your fundraising software is full of historical data. And while that's always been the case, the tools that are available now are better than ever to help you bridge the gap between what you would like to do and what you can reasonably do with your data to impact your fundraising. AI is democratizing donor analytics. Things that used to require teams of PhD machine learning experts and all kinds of IT infrastructure can now be done pretty easily. There is one important caveat: you must use AI safely. You are entrusted with some very personal data of your donors, so you need to be careful with how you use AI to work with that data and fully understand what AI can see and what might be happening with your data, those kind of things. So it's very important. The other why, in addition to just timing, is we want to strengthen our relationships with donors. You know, we want to build a relationship where we're connecting with them on the timetable that seems to work best for them and that they're most comfortable with. We want to work more efficiently as an organization and work smarter. This is not new news for just about anybody in the industry. Fundraising staff are in high demand. Turnover rates are high. There's a shortage of people in this industry, and using our data and our analytics can help make those people's jobs easier and less stressful, and also help them be more productive. So maybe we can do more with a little less. You know, what are we shooting for here? Why are we doing all of this? In addition to making our fundraisers' jobs better, we want larger gifts. We want the kind of relationship that leads to increased lifetime donor value. We want to improve donor retention and reduce donor fatigue complaints. The path to more fundraising is not more appeals. That's a good reminder. Successful fundraising is really an ongoing conversation and relationship between your organization and its donors that leads to continued support. That should be your foundation. We want to use our data to enhance those conversations and the relationship and provide actionable information to the frontline fundraisers. All right, we're going to burn through segmentation really quickly now. This is something, if you want more detail, we've got a full 1-hour webinar on this topic. Again, it's up on our YouTube channel, Reporting Express, no E in the Express, on YouTube, and you can review that in detail, but we'll quickly cover it so that everybody's somewhat level set here. Effective fundraising relies on understanding donor behavior. Groups of donors are going to do the same thing. Groups of donors that look alike are going to tend to act alike over time. And the benefits of this is it makes it possible for us to identify our most valuable donors, spot donors that we need to worry about lapsing, tailor communication types and timing to donors, and create highly impactful, actionable insights. Why does this work? Well, historically, it's been proven to work, first of all. This is a science that goes back 5 or 6 decades. Donors will exhibit predictable behavior patterns. You can't predict what an individual donor will do because they're all different and they all have different factors that impact their desire and ability to give. But if we look at 100 donors who have given at about the same time and at about the same level over about the same time period, that group will in general behave like another group of 100 donors that behave similarly in an earlier time frame. We can predict the second group, we can predict the later group, what they will do based on what the earlier group did with a very high degree of accuracy. The bigger your segments are and the more, not the wider they are, but the tighter they are with the more data points in them, the more accurate this can be. So the core gold standard model for donor segmentation is RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value. These are the 3 metrics that create the best snapshot of donor engagement. And most of what we'll talk about is some iteration on this. We're going to take that segmentation and we're going to break it down a little further and show you how to use it. We recommend something along these lines as your segment dimensions. Active, warm, and cold donors refer to how recently they have interacted with your organization. If they've made a gift within the last 12 months, we call them active. If they've made a gift more than 12 months ago, we call them warm. If it goes back more than 24 months, they're cold. And more than 36, for the sake of argument here, we're calling them lost. In many organizations, those timeframes may vary. You may not be a lost donor in some organizations until 60 months, based on what that organization's donor data has shown over time. You may not be cold until some longer period. I know a medical school that uses 15 months for their active donors because their doctors are so busy, it really looks like a 15-month cycle. But these are the dimensions that we will use in the examples we work through today. There are special donor categories that you need to pull out of your data so you don't distort it. Recurring donors look a little different because they make the same gift every month, so that can skew some things. So we generally will take them out. Donors that only attend events tend to behave a little differently, so we'll usually pull them out and look at them separately. Same thing with tribute and memorial donors. Those are kind of one-time or occasional donors, and we don't want them to necessarily skew our analytics of our appeals and campaigns. And organizational and individual donors can sometimes behave differently, so we might look at them separately. Although RFM is the gold standard for segmentation, we can use other anchor attributes to segment donors. Some common examples would be alumni and grateful patients and student families. Some group that you have a large enough set of data points to be able to really start to analyze, can give you some good insights into what that group might do in the future and how best to approach them for donations. All right, so we know what our segments are. Let's talk about each one quickly. Our active top in most organizations these days, 80 to 90% of your revenue is coming out of those. We call those Pareto organizations, the 80-20 rule. They require individual attention in most cases, and you'll usually have either a leadership person or a senior development officer assigned to those donors. Our warm top donors, we need to really pay attention to. These are our top donors that are at risk of leaving. So interventions required. They haven't given in a while, or they broke their pattern is usually what we're looking for. Our active middle donors, this is the growth engine where you really should spend a lot of your time. These are the donors that are going to eventually, you hope, graduate into being active top donors. Our warm middle donors, again, we're looking to reactivate those donors and make them active again so that there's a chance of them moving up. And then our bottom donors are, they're our foundation. They often don't represent very much in terms of a percentage of donations, but they could be future pipeline in some cases. You don't want to overextend yourself in terms of spending resources on that group usually. And the further down this list you go, the less time and investment you want to make into these groups. Our warm bottom donors, you might selectively try to reactivate some of them. And our cold donors, you're probably not going to have a very high success rate with unless the data shows that you might. All right, so what we're going to talk about is mixing communication, timing in particular, seasonality, things like that between segments, and we'll look at several individual segments and look at some data and see what we see. I talked about the tools getting better. The good news is the data is really simple. Most of this analysis can be done with 3 data fields: gift date, gift amount, and donor ID. If you're creating actionable lists, it's helpful to have the donor names so the development officers or campaign or appeal managers don't have to go look it up. But the real data that you need is just your gift history. You can enrich that data with other attributes. Zip code's a real common one. Other geographic data that you might want to look at depending on where your donors tend to live. But the core data points that we need to do this analysis are really simple. Now, the technology to perform this analysis. Much of this can be done with Excel or Google Sheets, just not easily. The more donors and gifts you have, the harder it gets. There are some calculations that would be really time-consuming to run and to spread across 100,000 rows in a spreadsheet, things like that. So there's other tools that we can use. Your CRM software or fundraising software may allow you to create reporting that provides some of this. Some of the same types of reports we'll look at are views of our data. Crystal Reports is another tool that's been around a long time that can help you pretty easily create bits and pieces of this. Really, when you start getting into this type of analytics, though, you want some kind of relational data structure. Our tool, Express Analytics, leverages SQL and AI to make it easy for you to make that jump. That's always been the problem, to jump from what we call square data, or the data that comes out of your CRM in report format, to relational data. Has historically been a pretty big jump. You need a database infrastructure. You got to secure that. You need to ETL or move your data between your CRM and that data structure. That kind of thing. And that's always slowed people down. With Express Analytics, we can automate that or make it really easy. And then once you have it in a relational data structure, you got to be able to use that. And in the past, that's required programmers and tools like SQL Server Reporting Services, or SRS, Power BI or Tableau, or other ways to work with relational data. Express Analytics lets you do it through natural language, so you can talk to your data. You can also leverage outside AI as well without sharing your data to do all kinds of things. And we'll see examples of the output. I'm not going to, this isn't a demo or anything. We'll just see examples of the output that could come out of these tools and how you'll analyze that output. But that's kind of what's available today. AI has made this much easier than it's ever been, and that's all been within the last 12 months. All right, how easy is it? In preparation for this presentation, I used our tool to develop a bunch of reports. You're going to see a lot of them and the results of them. And then I used AI outside of Express Analytics to write a program and analyze the work that I'd done. So between Friday and Saturday afternoon, I had generated 46 SQL programs, the shortest of which was 26 lines, the longest was 776. For a total of 9,161 lines of code. That's what I saved. That real number is probably 3 to 5 times that, as I was iterating through various reports and deciding which columns to take out, etc. 9,000 lines of code pre-AI is a good month's work for a programmer, and I did that in about 7 hours, something along those lines. So that is kind of what, and I can't code in SQL. I couldn't write one line of code in SQL. But that's what the power of AI and a platform like our Express Analytics gives you, is the ability to crunch data like a programmer without having to be a programmer. All right, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to strategically manage our pipeline. As you can see here, it's pretty simple. We're looking at new donors at the top, upgrade donors, filter out the at-risk, narrow down to the seasonal donors. We're trying to slice and dice our data as many ways as possible so we can be efficient. We don't want to make asks at the wrong time, and we don't want to leave opportunities on the table. The first thing we're going to look at is the donor journey in this organization. We're going to look at a data set that goes back about 20 years. And this is going to be similar to your data set. Forget the time frame. The data that's most relevant really is the most recent data. It forecasts what's going to happen more accurately than old data. But the old data is kind of interesting. It's interesting to see donors that have been around for 20 or 30 years. If you think about our donor journey, this is what we're going to go through and look at. We're going to look at new donors, active donors, stable donors, top donors, and lapsed donors, and see what the differences in their behavior is and how our data can point out those differences and how we can strategize against what we've learned. Everybody likes to think about seasonal giving patterns and thinks they might know what's going on, but until you really dig into your data, it's not always clear what you think is accurate. You can kind of get a hint here as to what we're going to see in this data as we start digging into it. First thing you want to do is analyze your donor journey, and we'll do that by segment. So we prioritize the segments we want to look at. Our new top and our recaptured top all the way over here. This is 80 or 90% of our revenue. So, probably 60% of your effort's going to be spent there. The new low and the recaptured low and middle donors, that's your long-term pipeline, more the middle than the low, but the low is important. And then the stable donors, we kind of look at a little differently. They're your long-term consecutive year donors, and your occasional donors also can be valuable, particularly at the top level when they may make larger gifts sporadically. All right, so we're going to dig right into some data. This analysis here is of new, low, and middle donors. So what does that mean? These are donors that donated for the first time in these years. So right now we're going to look at 2021 through 2022, 24-month period there. And we're comparing months, but we're really looking at the month kind of together. And we want to see what's going on with these new donors at the low and middle level. And in this case, low is under 160 of annual donations, and middle is between 160 and 2,300. So some of the things that we want to be concerned about are median gift amounts. Averages get skewed by your large donors. So while average is interesting, the median number is probably more relevant. And then retention. What percentage of those donors are going to give the next year? And lastly, what's the projected lifetime value or value over some period of time? In this case, we're looking at the value of these donors over 24 months. So a January 21 first-time donor will be analyzed between February of 21 and January of 24. I'm sorry, January of 23 to get to 24 months. You have to be careful that you set your analysis up right so that your January donors don't have, let's say you were doing a 2-year analysis, your January first-year donors would have 23 months after their first gift, and your December first-year donors would only have 12 months after their first gift, and that could skew things. So in this case, we're doing a 24-month look ahead to see what goes on. And I've highlighted a number of things that are kind of interesting. The first is up top here. If you look at this retention column, my January donors are retained better than almost any other donors by a significant amount. In both years, 35% of those donors made another gift. And in fact, the median months to the next gift were 9 and 6. Retained means they actually made another gift the following year. But on average, they also made another gift in that same year. So those donors, their lifetime value, their median lifetime value over 2 years was $180. Compare that to some of these other time periods. Look at my December first-time donors down here. The median value over the next 24 months was $20. And the median initial gift was $20. That was a big campaign. It brought in 550 donors over 2 years in December, but they gave very little. They only gave $55,000 in total for that many donors. You can look and see some of these other segments. The June-July timeframe, these had a really nice median lifetime value. The retention rate wasn't quite as good, but the lifetime value was pretty good. And these months down here in the fall were okay. They were pretty consistent. But the follow-on value was not all that great. And you can see why. You can see that the retention rate for those donors is much lower than in these other time periods. What does that tell us? We really want to focus on new donors, particularly at the low and middle level at the beginning of the year. And there might be a variety of reasons why. One is competition from other nonprofits could be lower at that time, which is a good thing. It could also be a good time for that type of donor because they're planning their tax returns. They may not get tax deductions, but they may have a tax refund that's available to them early in the year and might make them a little more generous at that time period. And then later in the year, they may pick up another gift just because it's been a while since their first gift. So that's some things that we could look at when we're studying the donor journey of new and middle donors. Let's dig into those December donors. These guys, if you look at this column and the number here, the first 135 donors or the first, let's see, what's this number here? 126 donors or so only donated $20, and their total lifetime giving was $20. So they made one donation and they were gone. Same thing for these $30 donors. Um, you don't want to commit a lot of resources to chasing those really low December donors. You probably want to send them one annual appeal a year, and that's it. And you might even, depending on the cost of that appeal, make it an electronic appeal only. You may not want to spend postage on them. You can kind of calculate that by your response rates and things. But these are not donors that are really contributing to your organization at a high level. We do the same analysis for all donors, and we see about the same thing. These donors that contributed very low amounts aren't going to be highly valuable donors in all likelihood anytime soon. So you really want to keep them to annual appeals until they start to show more more giving propensity. Now, your middle donors, take a look at these donors, and look at the lifetime giving of them. And this lifetime is not full lifetime. These are 2024 donors, so they haven't had a whole lot of time to add to their lifetime total, but they are adding to it already. If you look down here, some of these $500 donors have already contributed or contributed almost $1,400 already. These are down at the 260 to 280. These are ranked in order, by the way, of the amount they gave from least to most. But these donors are worth investing in. And part of the goal with these donors, or the prime goal with these donors, is to get a second gift. And if you remember looking at our low to middle donor analysis a couple screens back, the months where they're when we can collect them as a donor, when they're most likely to be retained, to give again, and when they're most likely to make a little bit larger gift, look like January, June, or July. So we really want to push them for a second gift in those months. When we get that second gift, the statistics will show that those donors are much more likely to make future gifts and have a much higher lifetime expected value than other than their retention rate goes up and their lifetime future value goes up. Obviously, if they never make a second gift, it's not not hard to calculate. They're worth more. But if they make a second, they're more likely to make a third, a fourth, a fifth, etc. So that second gift is really important, and you should have a program that focuses on providing the right information to them to get them to that second gift. Now, what happens if you lose them? If you lose a low or a middle donor, why do you care, or why do you want to try to get them back? Well, what gets interesting is if I lose a donor and get them back, the value of that donor goes up. It goes up pretty significantly. This column I added over here to this report has the value of them as a new donor. If I can recapture them, it means that all right, I lost them, but they're still interested. And when they come back, the likelihood is they're going to stay longer the second time. So these donors in January that had an initial 24-month future value of $180 or $180, after I recapture them, the next 24-month, on average, these were worth 820 and 340, 621 versus 70, 210 versus 40. That's a huge increase in expected value. So I may not chase the lost $20 donors, but I'm probably going to chase the lost 100 and up, because if I get them back, they're going to be valuable for me. The thing to look at here is the median months to the next gift, or months that they were lapsed. Most of these donors were lapsed for, kind of medium periods of time. So this organization probably doesn't want to throw middle donors into a cold bucket until more like the 60-month range, because a lot of these were recaptured 39 months, 52, 40, 31 and a half, 55, 41, 56. Um, we're capturing them pretty far out. So, uh, you know, you want to take that into consideration before you set your cold threshold. That's let's see, these are the modes. So these are the most common. So this is the median. And then these are the most common recapture months. You can see the most common recapture months are a little closer in. 13 is almost always it. If you can catch a donor that's lapsed in the first month after they lapse, that's your best chance of getting them back quickly. So what you really want to do is when they get to the 9-month time frame, you want to start chasing them or appealing to them so they don't lapse. But if they do, your best chance to get them is right away. So you don't want to fall behind on analyzing and pursuing your lapsed donors. All right, now we're going to look at top donors. These are the donors that you can see by the dollar amounts represent the meat of the organization's budget. And some things to point out. These donors at the end of the year, look at the retention rate for top donors. It's better than for the smaller donors. Anybody that makes a bigger commitment, in this case, $2,300 or more, is a little more committed up front. So the likelihood of them being retained is higher. But a loss to you if you can't retain them is significant. So, you really want to focus on the retention rate. Here's a couple things that I noticed. One is this year it wasn't a problem, but in 2021, the October and in both years, the November retention rates are significantly lower than the rest of the year. The most likely reason for that is one of two things. One is whoever's responsible for stewardship for those follow-up is busy at the end of the year around the holidays and they're not doing their job. And so we're losing opportunity. The second is that the donors themselves are so busy that it flies right past them. And maybe the better strategy would be to either catch them within 24 hours where it's top of mind, or wait until after the first of the year for your follow-up where they have a little more breathing room and they're more likely to see your stewardship. Some other things that are kind of interesting here, these median lifetime values. The median initial gift over here, in a lot of cases, the lifetime value here, it's the median gift is 20 or 10,000. The lifetime value is 29,000. 10 and 15. These donors have some long-term value to them beyond their initial gift, and that's what's typical of top donors. These are my top donors that have been recaptured. One of the most important things, we've talked about this a little bit, is 50% plus of the recaptured donors that are top donors gave more or were recaptured in months 13 to 15. So you really want to chase those donors in those first 3 months. In most cases, there's a high probability they just didn't get around to it. Didn't get around to making their gift, or they missed your appeal, something like that. So you really want to try to catch them. There's a very 50% greater, just over 50% chance that they'll re-engage in that 13 to 15 month time frame. Then the remainder that were recaptured between months 16 and 84. So some went way out. Once we got past 15, it was kind of sporadic as to when they came back in. What you'll tend to see is like at month 25 and 37, you'll pick some up. because they're used to that annual cycle of receiving an appeal around those times in a lot of cases. So that's something to think about when you're reaching out to those donors. All right, we're going to talk about our stable donors for a minute. These are donors that have 3 consecutive years of giving. One of the things to look at right away is what's the 2-year value of those donors? How much on average can I expect to get from them? 600 and 630 for our mid donors, low to mid, the median is over $600. That's significantly higher than new donors, recaptured donors. Those 3-year plus donors are going to give at a higher level going forward on average. The retention rate as well. Look at this retention rate. That's really good. 69%, 86 for the big ones over 2,300, right about 86, 87 for the tops, and 69 in both cases for the low to mid. Those are really good retention rates, and they're valuable donors because they're given a lot and they're retained at a high level. One of the things we can do is look at our stable mid-level and middle and low donors, and that's where we can develop a mid-level gift prospect list from. So one of the things we want to look at is the largest gift they've ever made. They fall in this category of on average contributing less than 2,300 a year on average. But they've made gifts that may be even larger than that on a one-time basis. So we sort this by the largest gift. By the way, this report here was created by me typing this prompt up here at the top in our system, and it generated the SQL code to produce this report, and it generated it and it executed it in about 15 or 20 seconds later. This is what I had, is this report. All these are the same way. That's how that works. Forgot to mention that earlier. But what you can see here is this is a really quick way for me to get my mid-level giving prospects. Anybody who's made a gift that's significantly larger than their average has got giving capacity. They've demonstrated that in the past. And so those are the donors that you want to hand to your development team and say, go see what you can make out of these. We want to look at our occasional donors as well. These are donors that have given 3 out of the last 5 years. They fall towards the lower end in terms of value, median giving, but they still can be important, particularly the higher level donors. I mean, these 6,700 and 10,000 numbers are significant. And you've got some big ones in there so you got to be careful with average. The average here was 43,000, but the median a year or two later was only 10,000. So a few big ones that raise the average, but a lot of them in the probably $5,000 to $20,000 range, or 5,000 to 10,000 range, giving you, or 5 to 20, giving you a median closer to 10. All right, so now we're going to look a little bit at some frequency and seasonal analysis. The first place I like to start is quarterly. It gives you a good feel for the seasonality, and you can really just slice and dice this data pretty easily. Once you have it organized by quarter, and you can see in our system, I said create a report showing distribution of gifts by donor by quarter. And these are as a percentage. So what percentage of their gifts were given in each quarter? And then I can start to whittle that data down to create real actionable information. If I was doing it all in my system, our system, Express Analytics, I'd say only include donors whose percentage in all 4 quarters is greater than 0. Those are donors that give in all 4 quarters of the year. So I can do that. I can also do the same thing by taking that break down by percentage into Excel and just filtering it. So in this case, if I wanted to see donors who'd given in all 4 quarters, I've just applied a filter to those columns and I've turned off the 0 donors, so 0%. So if I turn that off in all 4 quarters, what I get is a bunch of donors that have only given in the first quarter. And, what am I going to do with that group? I'm going to solicit them in June and July because those June and July donors are really valuable to my organization. I'm going to see if I can get another donation out of them to start at least. Same thing, my third quarter donors, my June and July donors, I really want them to give in January because that's where I'm going to find the most value, probably less competition from other competing nonprofit interests, things like that. Special Olympics is really good at this. They have mastered the art of the twice a year. It's something that, depending on what your donor data shows, could be valuable to you. We also want to look at average gifts per year by month. You can see what's going on across various segments, and we'll look at each segment here. But you can get a feel for what's going on by looking at this. You're looking for the peaks. These are my top donors. There aren't as many peaks. Most of my top donors are solicited directly by a development officer in most organizations. So you'll see some a little bit of seasonality, a little bit of variation. Some of that's just natural variation. Some of it is, workloads. The coming out of the end of the year, November, December, people have less time to meet with development officers. So, February, March is likely to be lower. They catch back up, in the April timeframe. That can be typical. This organization, everybody's higher in April. So they may have something going on in the April timeframe that attracts donors. Middle donors, you notice, like I said, April, big spike in April. This consistent level, some number below here could be regular donors that are donating every month on a consistent basis on a committed plan. My low donors, it's even worse. There's that April timeframe, April and December, a little spike there. This May could just be a carryover from April, some big appeal in April that brought in a bunch of donors that, let's look at them, 1,486 of them. On average, they only gave 1.17 times a year. So that's the lowest cohort of anybody in here. They attracted a lot of small donations, but I'm not sure they brought a ton of value. Within my low donors, I can start digging into that data and find some nuggets. In this case, I wanted to look at low donors. So I said, give me a list of low donors who gave less than $160 in 2024 and who made at least 3 gifts because I want them to be active. This list could be a target list for, probably would not invest a real development officer on it, but if you're an organization that has interns that are trying to learn the business, this would be a good place to put them to work. In this case, I did the math. There's 61 donors in this cohort that donated a total of $65.90 in total giving. But these are likely where our next middle donors are going to come from. It's these. So if you assign somebody this and they can move some percentage of these from low to middle next year, it's been worthwhile and they've probably gotten some good experience. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to invest a lot into this group because it just doesn't represent that many total dollars relative to what you're going to spend to go get them. New donor acquisition. These are 2024, a little typo up there. But things to look at here. You want to emphasize the months when the donor acquisitions tend to yield the most. So, average first gift amount, June, July, and March. In this organization, my average first gift amount across all donors is in the 6 to 10K range. April, it's $111. December, it's $800. May, it's $192. So I want to really emphasize my campaigns for new donor acquisition. I probably want to structure those so they go out in the months when historically they've returned the greatest total return, not necessarily the most new donors. This is a good evidence as to why you want to crunch your data in a variety of ways. Average doesn't really tell the story here. It's skewed very much by a couple of large gifts in some of these months. In this case, there's a $2 million gift in this month. There's a $1.2 million gift in that month, though. So that can skew some things. You want to really look at median more so than average when you're doing this acquisition or this kind of analysis. These are donors who made a second gift and what the value to them is. So if you think about these donors, particularly early in the year, who made a second gift, they went ahead and made that second gift over the next 36 months, they're worth significantly more than you would have otherwise expected. These are my active middle donors. And what I'm looking at here is a count of the number of gifts they made in each month. I'm going to do the same kind of slicing and dicing of that data with Excel filters or filtering it with my tool. Like here, I could say only include donors with one or more gift in exactly 3 or 4 different months. So that would show me my seasonal donors, assuming those months weren't consecutive, things like that. I could use that to create an actionable list. And I want to time my appeals. This column out here has the month of the most recent gift. So if I'm approaching some of these months, those are the months that I want to time my appeal in, because a lot of people will give on a, if they give in one month, odds are it's a good month the next year to get a gift from them. Now we're going to talk about donor scoring for a few minutes. Donor scoring helps you keep tabs on your top donors and identify potential future major and top donors from your middle donors. We can use it to identify early stage low donors who've got a chance to move up. This is a simple score. I basically look at total giving in 2024 and 2023 by donor. And I'm going to assign either an I, a D, or an E to 2 places in a score. The first place on the right is the 2022 to 2023 segment. So what happened there? This one's a D. The donor gave 43,000 in 22. They dropped in 2023 to 38,000. Having a little trouble reading the numbers, but hopefully you can see them. And then the next year they went up to 85,000. So they went DI, decrease, increase. You can kind of see that pattern. This one's 0, so they got an E, 0, 0. And then they jumped to 549,000. These are top donors, obviously, but I can do this same analysis across all of my donors. Now, I can add nuance to that, because while that's useful, having more detail could be more useful. So in this case, I'm going to add some different layers to it. An I plus, an I just means they gave more, but less than 25% more. An I plus means they increased from 25 to 50. An I plus plus means their increase went up over 50. Same thing on the decrease side. And then I've added an R and an N. An R means they were recaptured in a year, and an N means they were a new donor in a year. So you can see how these scores look, I++, I++. That's a donor you want to pay attention to. They gave 1,500, then 3,750, then 5,420. They've been increasing their giving every year. I want to pull all those I++s out, and if they meet my threshold for a development officer, I'm going to put them in somebody's portfolio. Same thing, my D minuses. I'm going to look at all my all my Ds, and if I've got Ds, if I've got D minuses, I want those donors to be in a development officer's portfolio to go figure out how we're going to keep from losing them, because their giving is decreasing pretty quickly. So I can do the same thing with frequency. I can run that score for giving amount, so how much they gave and how often they gave. And frequency is another really good indicator of their connection. When their frequency is going up, they're very connected. When the frequency is going down, it generally implies they're losing connection to your organization. So by combining the two, I can get a really good snapshot of their current relationship with the organization. And then I can augment that with like consecutive years and total years giving, and pay attention to those 4 factors. And that'll really help me isolate donors that we need to put some attention to. And this is what you would use primarily on your top donors or on your active middle donors to spot mid-level prospects or prospects to become top donors. I can also throw in the large gift flag. So if I've made a single gift more than double my average giving, that shows that I probably am open to a major gift. All right, so that's enough examples. The whole idea here is to help you build a data-driven culture. It's not that complicated. Crunching of the data can be done relatively easily now. And once your team gets comfortable with how to look at data, they can build feedback loops and really start to leverage the data to make their jobs easier and actually be more effective in the process. Things that you want to track, just as a reminder, key KPIs, retention rate, average gift progression, am I giving more, response rates, ROI, cost per dollar raised, things like that. Warning signs, again, retention is an important one. Those donors that have already given to you are way more valuable than most prospects are. So you want to really focus on retention. If your donors are giving less frequently, that's not a good sign. If they're complaining about communication, that can be bad as well. You don't want to over solicit them. And then if you have had historically successful appeals, but the response rate's dropping over time, you need to really dig into that. Common implementation challenges for everybody is, the first is paralysis. The best thing to do, because you have tons of data. If you go into your CRM, there's 1,000 reports in there and a million ways to look at it, but most of them aren't very useful. They're more rear view mirror looking than anything. You really want to start with RFM. That's the gold standard for this kind of analysis. Don't go crazy with your segments. Start with 5 to 10 meaningful segments, and make sure your data is pretty clean before you start. Keep it pretty straightforward and consistent, and that'll be better than complex sporadic efforts. Some things to consider, don't take generic nonprofit rules of thumb as to be the Bible. Your sector may have certain factors that impact how donors give, how and when donors give. You need to keep that in mind when you're setting up your KPIs and your plan. And again, start with RFM. Focus on creating actionable reports for development officers. You give them something to do that they can go run with and be successful with, they'll be happy and they'll be coming back for more. You know, you should be able to get this kind of stuff up and running and integrated into your organization within a month or so. And don't let the development officers forget that they need to balance using those analytics with relationship building. That's their most important job, is building that personal connection. We've got a minute or two for questions.